So there are a few additional handy little workflows in the modeling toolkit, which may not be obvious at first, and a couple of those are under transform constraints. We talked about earlier how we can use this with quad draw in order to build a new surface on top of an existing surface. We can also use it for modifying an existing surface. So for instance, we have edge slide as an option. So what you can see here is if I grab a vertice and I begin to move this vertice around, actually let me enable the modeling toolkit. What you can see here is that I'm moving this freeform. So if I go in and I turn on my edge slide, now what I've done is I've constrained that. You can see that the manipulator will offset from the actual vertice. So I'm either constraining the vertice to this edge, to this edge, to this edge, or this edge. So I can grab a couple of these and I can actually go in and I can basically pick these up and I can move them along their own incoming and outgoing edges. I could do this with an entire edge loop, for instance, or an entire partial edge loop by shift selecting a section, and now I can move that entire piece of the edge loop, or likewise, if I did this at the edge level, I could grab the entire edge loop and I could basically constrain this to the existing incoming and outgoing edges, the perpendicular edges. Now another thing that we can do that's really handy is a surface slide, and surface slide also works with soft select. So for instance, if I were to go in and turn in soft select, you can see here that I'm actually sliding these edges along the surface. Now I can't actually move them off of the shape. If I were to go in and turn this off, you can see I get freeform motion, which is what I would expect, or movement rather. If I go into surface mode, you can see now these will actually just crawl around on the surface. So I can push these forward, I can push these back, but I'm actually preserving the overall shape of the surface. You can see it actually looks the same before and after. I've just changed kind of the proportion or kind of placement of the various vertices slash edges. I'm going to talk about one more thing with the modeling toolkit that's kind of interesting. I'm going to grab these vertices here on the end, and you can see that I have just kind of freeform movement of these vertices. Well, one thing that you can do is if you enable the modeling toolkit, you can actually lock specific vertices. So if I go in and lock these vertices, what I've done is I've prevented any editing of those vertices. Now I can actually move that transform around, those vertices stay in place. If I grab all these vertices, you can see that the ones that I didn't lock are freely movable, but the ones that I did lock are essentially immobile. Basically, I can't move them until I specifically go in and unlock them. And when I do that, now I have the ability to move them again. So if you're ever in a situation where you need to keep vertices in a specific location and make changes to, say, the neighbors, for instance, that in that other example before, I could go in and say, for instance, grab these edges or vertices here, I can lock them, and then I can go in and grab the entire edge loop, and if I turn on my edge slide constraint, you can see that only the edges that I have not locked are getting affected, and the ones that I did lock are not affected. Then I can go in and I can unlock everything, and now I have free control again. So there's still a number of extra things to cover on the modeling front. This is one of the biggest modeling releases we've had in a number of years. So in addition to what you see here in the modeling toolkit, there's quite a few other things as well. So one thing you've been able to do in the past is if you right click in the background and do a select all, it'll select all the objects in your scene. Now if you go into component mode and you apply select all, it will select all the components of a given object. And if you grab multiple objects in component mode and do a select all, it will grab all the components for those objects, whether they're vertices, faces, or edges. So it's just a handy way of accessing all the components. But you can also go in and you can access what are called similar components. So if I grab the arms here, you can see this is one shape that is made up of a bunch of arms that are actually the same topology. So if I wanted to make an extrusion, say for instance here, in the past I would have to actually rebuild this whole thing or try to select them all simultaneously. So I'm actually going to grab the faces in this little section here, and I'm going to go under edit and apply a select similar. And that's going to allow me to select all of those faces on the matching arms. So it does it based on topology and structure of the objects. Then I can also go in and apply edits this way, so I could do something like an extrude, where I could go in and I could add a little bit of thickness, add a little bit of a taper to that, and then apply some divisions. And now I've got that same shape applied on all these objects, or all these pieces. So let's smooth this out and see what this looks like if it's smooth. And what you'll notice is it starts to round corners at different places. So what I want to do is actually add some edge creasing to this, but instead of doing it individually, I'm going to use the new Crease Set Editor. The Crease Set Editor allows you to manage crease values for given sets of objects. So I'm going to go in and grab this edge loop here, and once again I'll do a select similar so that I can grab the similar edges on the other arms, and I'll simply apply a crease set. That'll automatically set the value to 2, and I can change that after the fact if I want to. Let's go in and grab another loop here, and let's actually go in and do a select similar. I'll create a new crease set, and I might even want to push this out a little bit just to exaggerate it. So I'll go into my normal average push mode. Let's actually just scale them. There we go. That's what I'm trying to do, is just create a little bit more influence there so I can actually begin to see the crease. And then likewise here, I might want to go in and add a crease right in here. So once again, I'll just quickly go in and do a select similar. I'll add a new set, and there's a crease value associated with that. So now you can start to see the creasing effect that I'm getting at these different points. So now what I can do is I can turn that off and on for each one of these sets. So I can basically go in and say, okay, well I want to turn that off, or maybe I want to turn this one on, and I want to turn the crease for the exterior off, or that's the interior there. But you get the basic idea. I can go in and I can change these values individually on each set of edges, basically giving me the amount of crease I need. So I'll finish off with a couple of new features from the BonusTools pack. So if you go into BonusTools under the modeling menu set, you can pull this off, and I've got a number of new features in here for the 2014 release, 2 of which are related. One is called Delete Edge Loop tool, and one is called Collapse Edge Ring tool, and they're similar. So one works of course with loops and one works with rings. So if I go into the interactive Delete Edge Loop tool, again, it puts me in an interactive mode, and I can just click on any given loop and it'll automatically delete that loop. So if I wanted to delete this loop here, I can just click and it will find the loop and then remove all the associated edges. The ring tool is a little bit different, similar but different. It actually works along the ring path and then collapses the 2 neighboring loop edges, or edge loops rather. So if I go to Collapse Edge Ring and I click for instance on this, it will actually solve the ring and then collapse based on that ring. So another example would be over here. Whoops, you don't want to select all the edges because that'll collapse everything. But if I go into collapse edge mode here and I click on this one here, it'll collapse there, and then I can come in and collapse there and maybe collapse there, and quickly go in and start to remove detail from my object until I have something a lot simpler. Then again, I can go back into my delete edge loop tool here, maybe delete that edge loop there, come around the other side, delete that edge loop there, and then pretty quickly I've gone in and cleaned up my model, doing kind of a manual poly reduce. So one other thing to quickly show is a simple little tool called Convert Selection to Parameter Edges. What this allows you to do is basically grab a series of faces. You can see these faces are actually connected here. And now I can go in and I can convert that to perimeter edges. And that will actually grab the associated edges at the border of the selection. And then I can use something like maybe the detached components to basically break that into its own separate piece. So that works with any selection. So again, if I were to go in and select any arbitrary set of faces here, and I go in and do a convert, it's going to go in and find the associated border for those faces. You could also use that for texturing. So if you wanted to create a texture border around some faces, you could do the convert to perimeter edges and then use your cut UVs to actually generate a border from that. So there you go. There have been a wide range of modeling tools added for the 2014 release. Hopefully this is a pretty good overview for you, enough to get you started and have fun working with it. Thanks. Bye.